Anyway, if we can cross over now to Matthew Phillips and Sine Nomine, if you want to get control taken, or if Ruth or Steve can pass it on. There we are.
Ooh.
That's it.
As you've spotlighted my video, right?
That sounds fine.
I'm afraid this is a London show background rather than Wakefield. I didn't remember to get a photo out in time. There we go. Sorry about that. Just to warn people, it's always dangerous doing live demos. We saw that with some of the stuff Andrew was demonstrating earlier. And it's particularly dangerous when you're demonstrating new software, which is hot off the zip file today. We had a bit of a worry about just before lunch when I did some testing, when I started thinking about what I might demo. And we had some horrible crashes. Bit of investigation. It appears that there's some unpleasant interaction between RISCOSM and the VNC server that we were using to be able to share the screen onto the PC's desktop. But fingers crossed, we might not hit it if we're careful, but if it does, then please bear with us. I think it maybe depends a bit on what VNC client you're using, and it seems that the one that's running on this PC hasn't yet triggered it to crash, whereas Avalanche was quite good at making it crash. So we might investigate that further, but just to be warned. So first thing we're going to demonstrate is the new version of RISCOSM. We're calling this RISCOSM 2.0. Not really because it's got incredible new features in it, but because there's been a big change in the data format, and so everyone will need new data downloaded to take advantage of the full features. Though it does support the old data format as well. It's just you can't load new data with the old RISCOSM. So as we were getting up to about version 1.83 or so, we thought, well, let's jump up to 2.0 and then it'll be really clear what's going on. So I'm going to try sharing my screen if that's been allowed. And hopefully you should now be seeing a desktop. Good. And I'll try not to go too fast because I'm aware that Zoom goes really, gets quite laggy sometimes. So this is just a Raspberry Pi 3 and not quite on the latest version of the operating system. And the first thing we want to demonstrate is actually, what shall we do first? Shall we do the tracker first?
No, we do the tracker.
Well, you better go and yeah. For a while, RISCOSM has supported various WIMP messages which allow you to transmit information to RISCOSM. And Chris Hall has taken advantage of this with the SatNav software, which if you've got the appropriate equipment attached to your computer, will get a GPS reading and then tell RISCOSM where the computer currently is. We also use this in Recce. It's about time we published the information on it, and I was about to upload it this morning when I realized it had a few sort of personal notes in it about things that needed fixing. So hopefully sometime in the next week, we will actually get this uploaded. But we have shared it with a few people, and if you're interested and we don't seem to be getting it published quick enough, do prod us. One person who's had it for the last, had that information for a while, has been developing some nice software for use with a GPS tracking device, which works on mobile data networks. And he's shared this with us. So this is not polished software. It's not for sale or anything like that. It's just something that one of our users has been trying out. And I haven't got one of the devices to show you, actually. This is a bit of a mistake because the two devices are currently outside being walked around the area. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to see where they are. But the devices are about maybe 1.5 inches by 2 inches you know, they're about the size of a couple of matchboxes. They take a SIM card, and with mobile data, every so often, once a minute or so, they say where they are in the world. So let's hope this works. I'm just going to run this. Software here. It opens. It writes some information into a file on the RAM disk to say what's going on. The icon, there's something wrong with our version here because there's no icon here, but it does have some little text underneath. And what I might need to do is wake up the trackers. I think we'll probably have to do that. Don't know how long this is going to take. So there are two of these devices, and what the software is doing here, it's running directly on RISCOS, and it's written in BASIC, and it's essentially a web server application. So we've set up our firewall on the router to send communication from these two trackers. These two trackers have been configured with our home's fixed IP address and on a particular port, and they're communicating over that port. The firewall is the NAT in the router is transferring it to the machine and through to the Raspberry Pi, and that's being picked up by the GPS tracking software. And here we now have our first fix. That's now showing here the address. It's looking up the address via nominating. DU247 is a grit box somewhere on Archery Rise in Durham. Now the other one is apparently is on 20 Dalton Crescent. That's somewhere completely different. What I'm a bit surprised about is, have we actually got a map? There we are. Right. I'm just going to go into the pins and tracks thing because there are a couple of old ones from when we were testing earlier, which I just want to get rid of off the map. So here you can see that actually our keen assistants have got a fair distance. And one of them is, well, we'll zoom in a little bit. And we can, with the pins and tracks window, you can set these data streams to record if you want to. And that will then start building up a GPX file. So, and as you can see, when it moves, we then have a starting marker and the current position of the tracker, it seems. I have to say, this this seems to be showing up a slight flaw in the software, because I'm not sure we've ever really used it with two devices which were a reasonable distance from each other. It looked to me like when it was updating that it was dragging the map over to close to one of them and then over to the other one. But I'm hoping if we zoom out far enough that we'll be able to see both of these things moving. Now, we'll keep that running, and in the meantime, talk about one or two other things. We've, oh, hang on, what's gone on there? Sorry, it's just the mouse works in a bit slightly odd way with when you're using VNC. So I don't actually want this open at all. We have, yes, I did actually. Sorry, this is a very polished demo. One of the things I just wanted to show people about is a feature in the pins and tracks window. So we've got these two tracks down here, but we've also got a lot of other pins and tracks that we've saved before. One of the things I didn't know about, which has actually been improved recently, is the find feature. So if you're on the pins and tracks area, you can do a search. And I'm going to look for the word refuge, because I know that it happens to appear in the descriptions of 3 of these points. So the search feature used to just search the titles of pins and tracks, but it now also searches the descriptions, which is where the word refuge appears. And it expands the folders that they're in, and you can then, if you want to, go pin and track selection and put them on the map. New map. There have been some enhancements to this as well, because you can now choose whether you want to add the items to the map or show the map only showing these new pins, because you might have had some others that you were viewing and you want to get rid of them. Or you can even show the selection without drawing a map if you want to just plot them on the screen. So I'm going to add the selection, and they will then appear on the map. There we are. Oops. Yeah. And our mapping's moving because the tracker is moving. I think one of our assistants has covered quite a lot more ground than the other. But right, hopefully we'll now see both of these tracks and, yep, both of the tracks and all of the pins. Okay, right. Next thing to demonstrate, I think we've probably finished with those tracks really, because if I start demonstrating the next thing I want to show, it'll start moving me back. Hang on. I'm just worried whether the map will get moved back again to where the tracks, where the trackers are. But I think we can turn that off, can't we? We can say that we don't actually want to follow the point with the map. So let's do that, and we can keep those running and demonstrate some other features. Okay. So the main purpose, the main improvement with RISCOSM 2 is that we now have much faster map loading of small scale maps. This is something which people have been bothered about for a while, that if you go into really small scale maps like 1 in 500,000 or even smaller, they could take a very long time to draw. Now, we'll just demonstrate this. This is where I then have to entertain you for a little bit, because although the speed has improved, it's still not as rapid as you might want for a live demo. So maybe at the next show we'll slap some paint on the wall and point the camera at that. But for now, you'll just have to make do with this lovely white screen. And I'll use the time to explain what's actually going on. We found, when we started looking into the efficiencies of the system, that there were quite a lot of things wrong with what we were doing at the very small scale maps. So one of the things we have to do when we convert the map data is structure it so that it's easy to load in the objects that are actually going to be rendered on the map. So you don't really want to have grit boxes and lampposts and really small things like that loaded into the data when you're on a small scale map. So we subdivide all the data and we layer it so that the right bits are loaded at the right time. Now, it turned out I'd actually got that wrong because I was responsible for writing the OSM convert data structuring application, and Hilary wrote RISCOSM to load in the data and render it. And it turned out I'd misinterpreted some of the instructions she'd given me. So in fact, we were loading in at a relatively small scale, quite a lot of areas of land use that she didn't want at that level because I'd made a mistake. So we got that sorted out. That was quite an easy one to fix. But we then thought, well, you know, even though we might be interested in woodland at a certain scale, like 1 in 50,000, we don't really need to load any areas of woodland which are so small that they're just a single dot at 1 in 50,000. So OSM Convert has now been improved to actually calculate the area of every single area that's going to be rendered, and it pushes it down to the appropriate level, so it's not going to end up getting loaded in when it's not even going to appear on the map. Similarly, things like routes, which are long-distance relations of ways, they can be bus routes or long-distance cycle routes or walking routes, Roman roads, things like this. Again, they are being pushed down in the data so that you wouldn't be loading them in at small scales. Oh, you know what, it's finished. Right. We also changed the style sheet a little bit so that some of the things which aren't so interesting at small scales aren't rendered at small scales. And we also improved the efficiency of the data loading so that the structures are better and actually operate quite a lot faster. So we've done quite a lot of work to achieve all of that. Now, I hope that you found that interesting enough that you didn't really get too bored while it was rendering the map. I'll just show you how quickly it did this. So this is a 1 in 2 million map centered on Nottingham, and it's taken 2.5 minutes to load. Well, in the previous version of RISCOSM, with the previous data structure, that would have taken 7.5 minutes. We've actually knocked 5 minutes off the data loading process for that. If we weren't running a VNC server, by the way, if this was actually running direct on the Raspberry Pi and I hadn't got the VNC server running, it would only take 2 minutes. There's a half a minute is just the extra processing that the VNC server is doing to send all of that screen information across to me. We've cut 5.5 minutes off the 7.5 minute rendering time, loading and rendering time, which is pretty good. Because of that, 1 in 2 million used to be the smallest scale that we would allow RISCOSM to render, because we didn't want people to get so incredibly bored that they would throw the software in the bin. Because it's now much faster at loading the data, we've changed the limits so that you can go to 1 in 8 million. With 1 in 8 million, you can get the whole of the British Isles depicted in the screen this size. If you center it on Carlisle, that works quite well. You might not realize how much of the north there is if you live somewhere down south. And I'm including Wakefield in down south here. You can now go up to 1 in 8 million. It will be slow. It's still not desperately speedy. I think the map of the whole of the British Isles takes about 2.5 minutes. You know, when you can get hold of a wonderful new web browser that runs on RISC-OS and can do OpenStreetMap on the web, you'll probably want to use that for just looking at maps. But of course, RISC-OSM adds all the extra features of vector formats to be able to manipulate your maps and do all sorts of other things with them. So we will just go back quickly to these intrepid explorers and see if we can do map follows point again. And I should have probably switched back to a more sensible scale first. And we'll just see where they are. And it looks like they are actually meeting up somewhere, I think. They may be on the way to a rendezvous. So there we go. I'm going to quit the tracking now. You see it disappears, and we can go and in fact grab GPX files which have been recorded by the tracking software. So that's as an alternative to what we were doing with our track recording. And it puts in these little root points, which can be expanded with, it shows the addresses that have been looked up as we go. Is this a good point to demonstrate exporting a file, a track with CSV? Because this is another little improvement. Exporting CSV was something we didn't used to be able to do for a track, but now we can. I'm going to put a few more things into the, we'll put a grid reference in and the time. And then we'll drop that onto the RAM disk. Actually, to view the CSV file, it's quite handy just dropping it onto RISCOSM, really. So there you can see the latitudes and longitudes of the points, and the comments that have been put in, and national grid references which have been calculated by RISCOSM. Right, well, that took 20 minutes, so we've only got a very small amount of time left to cover a couple of other new developments. I do not want that drive, I want this one. So along with RISCOSM, we also sell a product called RECCE, and RECCE has been enhanced to cover the weather. So if you'd like to know the weather forecast, you can now, as well as all these other things like viewing photographs, planning applications, various other sorts of data, we've now got weather forecasts. And this has been released today as well. It's a chargeable upgrade for both RISCOSM and for RECCE. They're each of £5 to upgrade from the previous versions. We're continuing with the practice of donating the proceeds from RECCE to the networking bounties for RISCOS Open because we rely very much on those improvements for the software. So as you can see, we've got pretty good weather at the moment, and you can tab through to see the rest of the week. If you don't want the 48-hour details, you can just have every 3 hours. Oops, don't know what NetSurf's doing there. And you can also customize this. So if you want to put in the humidity, but get rid of the UV index and the probability of rain, you can turn those off. Maybe you want to have the visibility expressed in miles instead of very good and stuff like that. Temperature, you can switch to Fahrenheit if you want. And you can export a draw file of it. Let's try that again. It's quite tricky with the VNC because you can't actually see what you're dragging. So as you can see, here is a draw file generated of the weather forecast for Observatory Hill. I'm not sure why the wind is always north. That's
it's just that particular forecast.
Oh, okay. That weather forecast point never has any actual wind speed, apparently. And you can also export CSV, which again, I'll just drop back onto RISCOSM because it's got a nice way of displaying CSV. So you get all of this information of, I think, probably the things that you've selected in the display. So that's quite nice. Right, 7 minutes left. What's that? Oh, yes. And good point is you do get the weather forecast displayed on the map as a draw file. And we can indeed, let me just demonstrate this. We'll find weather over here as well. We also support Open Weather Map. That's an alternative source. So here we have Open Weather Map forecast for Langley Moor, and
Fahrenheit, one's in Fahrenheit.
one's in Fahrenheit and the other's in, yeah, let me just change that. We'll put them both into Celsius. Oh,
Doesn't update
goodness
the
knows.
map.
Right.
Just have to click on one.
So what I just wanted to show you is if we want to look at the forecast for another day, we can click there, and in fact, it'll update the symbol on the map for both locations to the appropriate date and time that we've picked there. So that's quite good fun. And this is all done using communication protocol between RISCOSM and other applications, which, as I say, we will be publishing shortly. And then you can also write things like this, which we'd be glad to see. So I think that's enough of RISCOSM, and we will very quickly say that there are some improvements to impact. With impact, we now have a new field list window, which allows you to see all the information about the fields that you've got in your database, and you can print that as a draw file or export it as a draw file if you wish. So that's a useful overview of the structure of your database. And with imp email, we've now added extra fields. You can have blind carbon copy, reply to, and sender if you wish to add those fields to your emails. And I better stop there in case we have any questions. 5 minutes left, I think. I hope you heard all of that, because I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, you're absolutely fine there. Yeah. Quickie question, any special show weekend prices, or what are the prices and how do we get all the bits and bobs?
Oh, well, the new software, Impact and imp email are not yet up on the website. They will be very soon, I hope, but there's still a little bit of tidying up to do. Recce and RISCOSM are up on our website, which I hope you all know. We'll put that into the chat as well. There aren't special discounts for the show, I'm afraid, but that's because it's all so cheap anyway.
I must say there's been a couple of comments about how amazing RISCOSM and all the other bits and pieces are. And I must admit, if someone said maps are interesting, before you wrote this, I would have gone, you are joking. And they're amazingly interesting. We even got a comment in the box there from a town councillor, and he said, "Oh, planning applications." That's really useful.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah,
it's amazing how much it links into, and absolute bargain if you're at all interested in any of that. I'll wait for any more questions.
If you've got organizer, if you've got click on the postcode, you can load RISCOSM immediately. And on my Pi 4, it does it in a blink of an eye.
Yep. Though
done the Matthews.
Though I have to say, we do not have Northern Ireland postcodes, just in case. We've had a couple of people spot this. The postcode data only covers Great Britain because it's provided to us not by Royal Mail, who charge a lot, but by the Ordnance Survey, who release an open version of the postcode data, which isn't quite as precise as the Royal Mail. But the Ordnance Survey do not operate in Ireland. There's the Ordnance Survey of Northern Ireland, and they don't release that data, and nor does the Northern Ireland authorities. So we cannot, I'm afraid, cover Northern Ireland with postcodes.
One gotcha I found, it doesn't work with post office boxes because they don't have an actual physical presence anywhere. Apart from that, it's brilliant.
I understand you cover some other countries as well. Is it Canada and Holland, or are there some more now?
Well, we've got available for download. We have Canada, USA, Australasia, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Germany. It's basically, I think, all of the countries that we've got customers in. So that software is all available for download. But we can convert many other countries. I mean, we do all European countries. We've done Africa and South America and Central America in the past. The ones that we don't tend to bother with are Asian and Middle Eastern countries because, unfortunately, you really need to have better font support for exotic, non-Western fonts, really.
Yes, yeah.
You can render things to some extent, but we don't go to the trouble of doing the data conversion takes hours and hours. And we don't go to the trouble of that when I don't think you get a very good result from the map, mostly.
Is there a rule bounty, do you think, that needs to be done there?
No, I don't think so, actually.
Because it's not part of Unicode, presumably, is it?
Yeah, but the thing is, we use the Ruffle library, which was written for NetSurf to render Unicode fonts, and that works very well, but it doesn't support right-to-left character sets. So that's, if you look at a page that's in Hebrew or Arabic in NetSurf, it'll all be the wrong way around and probably even more impossible to read than normal. So I have looked at trying to see whether I could work out how to enhance Ruffle, which would benefit NetSurf as well, but I can't get my head around the code. It's written in a very clever way.
Okay.
So that would be an enhancement.
I think we'll have to finish there. I think we've just run over by a minute or so. Unless there's one quick last question.
Please, if I may.
Yes.
I've converted some hopefully open map data for places you don't cover. Would I need to reconvert them for the new version of OSM?
The new version of RISCOSM supports the old converted data just as well as, if not better than, the old version of RISCOSM. So you don't have to reconvert anything. But we have uploaded the converter tool in a new version, and so you'll feel free to reconvert stuff if you want. But you'll get some of the benefits just by having the new RISCOSM.
So do you advise downloading new maps as well?
To get the full benefits, you will need to download the new maps. There's a slight improvement in data load and in the speed of data loading without the new map data, but the majority of it comes from the combination of the new map data and the new software.
Thank you.